Hi, this is my review of the Vexith role-playing game Core Rulebook. This is a review covering both the digital and the physical version of the rulebook. With so many fantasy role-playing games out there, you really have to focus on the best of the best. And I think Vexith is probably one of the best fantasy role-playing games that I have ever seen. Let's talk about the quality of both the physical and the digital versions of the rulebook. The physical book is quite beautiful, it's quite sturdy as you can see, it's hardcover, it's in a print on demand format that you can get it at drivethrurpg.com, and this is the premium version. There's a standard version that the pages are a bit less thick and the colors are less vibrant, but this is the premium version, and as you can see, it's quite beautiful. I just really like the aesthetic of it. It's a nice combination of old school style with new school aesthetics. I think the majority, if not all, of the illustrations in this book are hand drawn using traditional paints and pigments and techniques. You can even see the texture of different paper used to paint the illustrations on, and that's pretty awesome. It feels quite classic or traditional, and the book is great. You have a table of contents, and everything is very well organized, very well written. The instructions are amazing. It's been some time since I've seen some traditional or classical fantasy role-playing game that has such an amazing writing style. Vexith is going to, if you haven't played many role-playing games, this is going to turn you into a hardcore role player. And even if you have been playing fantasy role-playing games for some time, it's going to show you some pretty unique things when it comes to character creation, and as I was telling you, the writing style guides you through the entire process quite smoothly, and the book has this gorgeous graphic design. The layout feels kind of like sort of like magical gemstone texture of sorts, and each section of the book is color coded. So if you want to say, oh, I'm looking for the magic section, you go to the blue section. I'm looking for the gameplay section, you go to the green section. So that's pretty handy, and it looks really nice. This is one of the best looking books I have ever seen, and the illustrations look great, and they're quite thoughtful and as to the aesthetics or the ergonomical perception of the book. So for example, in the illustration that you have in the cover, you have the characters entering a dungeon. As you can see, it's quite an original party of monstrous characters and a human. And in the illustration following that one, you have the perspective from the creature inside the dungeon over here. So like there's some kind of a monster waiting for them inside. And the entire book is just filled with those illustrations that have an old school feel to them with new aesthetics. So let me show you a few of the illustrations in the book. They look quite beautiful. Just take a look at this one. Up close, it is possible to see the texture of the paper on which it was painted. And at the end, at the back of the book, you have a lot of sheets of all kinds. You have character sheets, but you also have a character sheet that will assist you in creating a character. This game focuses on a character point-based system. That is, you're going to build your character through a point-by process, and you have a sheet to organize that process, because characters here are quite deep, quite complex, and that's one of the strongest points in this game. You're going to find many deep and rich systems or rather subsystems in game, but they are quite easy and smooth in terms of execution. You also have sheets for spells and bardic songs. And I can't wait to tell you about the bardic song system, because this is probably one of the best treatments when it comes to bardic songs to customizing your bard. You have sheets for creatures, so you can create your own monsters, and you have character status mats for both the monsters and the player characters, so you can keep track of the stamina, health, fatigue, etc. You also have some templates, so you can see the different miniatures affected by the spell effects. So this is it's just very beautiful. The entire rulebook is quite beautiful. Now, to play this game, you need between 3 to 5 player characters and a game master. You could play it with less, but because this game really puts a strong emphasis on the role-playing aspect, you really need a good variety of player characters so that they work as a team to solve the different challenges that they will face in the Vexith. You could play it with less people, but if you're going to do that, I would recommend that each player would play with at least 2 player characters, so you have a wide variety of skills and powers that you can use. You also need polyhedral dice, but you only use 5 of them: the 4-sided die, the 6-sided die, 8-sided die, 10-sided die, and the 12-sided die. You also need a grid and some counters to represent your character, maybe a miniature or a counter, and tokens of different colors, red, green, and blue, to keep track of your health and stamina, etc. You also, well, while not entirely necessary, there is an app so you can keep track of your initiative between each combat round, and you're going to find that it's quite useful and easy to use, because it also keeps track of something called lucky and tough breaks that I will cover in a few minutes. So, and the app is free. You just go to the website and you have a small paragraph telling you how to use it, and it helps you run combats quite smoothly. This book really does a great job in introducing you to role-playing games if you have never played them. And when it comes to character creation, you get a character tutorial of this ogre, Borgrel the ogre. You can follow the entire process on how they created this spellcaster fighter type of character with a rat pet, or animal companion. And that's another of the cool things of Vexith. You can create pretty much any character that you can think of. There are 44 races in this rulebook, and that's pretty cool. When it comes to fantasy rulebooks, you usually just get like 6 or 10 races, but here you have 44 races, so you can choose the type of character that you want, and you don't need to you don't feel trapped within stereotypes. If you want to have a character that is big and burly and can also use magic, you can do that. While some characters may be more effective at certain tasks, all the character concepts are playable. So for example, maybe you have a Minotaur that is quite strong and just a juggernaut when it comes to fighting up close, but you could also have a Pixie that is also a quite capable warrior, so it all depends on how you're going to play that character. So the Minotaur is usually going to fight out in the open, charging at his opponents and crushing them, and the Pixie would be better suited to getting inside this, nooks and crannies and trying to surprise the opponent by attacking the jugular at certain times. So it all depends on your playing style. However, it's highly recommended that you have a specific role within a party, because this is an old school game at its heart. It has some innovations, but it's still old school and quite brutal. It punishes blunders and tactical errors with a lot of severity. Combat is quite lethal. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I would like to talk more about the character races because they feel really fun to use, and that's very important. And you have just a huge variety of them in all shapes and sizes. Every player is going to find something that they like when it comes to these character races. So, for example, you have races such as the Drakthar, and the Drakthars are kind of like miniature dragons that have special powers and abilities depending on their draconic heritage. You also have the Etin. Now, the Etin, I think it's the most original. Kind of feels like the poster or flagship character for this game because this is a very original character concept by itself, in my opinion, the race as a playable race, because it needs to be controlled and created by two players. Two players will have to think about how to build this Etin character, because the Etin, as many of you know, is a two-headed sort of giant, in this case kind of like an ogre, and each head has its own personality, and maybe one head is kind of like a wizard or a magic user, and the other head is kind of like a berserker. So you can come up with some very crazy combinations, and each player controls one half of the body, of the upper part of the body, a head and an arm. But if they want to move, they have to come to an agreement on where to move the character. And if they disagree on how to move the character, both players will have to fight for control of the body, and the one who wins is going to be able to move the Etin around. If they end up in a tie, they're going to mess up that round because they're going to be bickering between themselves and they won't be able to move. So it's quite interesting, and it's going to be quite funny if you manage to get two players with different playing styles to control an Etin. There's going to be a lot of funny moments. You also, I forgot to mention, because the Etin has two heads, they could also, for example, if both heads were spellcasters, they could cast two spells in the same round and maybe drink two potions at the same time. You also have races such as the Gargant. If you wanted to play like a gargoyle character, you can play the Gargant, and you can confuse your opponents by pretending you're a statue. You also have the Holdrian, which is basically like a large cat that can sometimes stand on its own 2 feet and attack with humanoid weapons. You also have the humans, of course, that could be quite different from one another because of their ancestry. But you also have Icranids, and Icranids are kind of like intelligent insects divided by castes. You also have the Krivog, which are kind of like lone hunters and survivors that look like a giant mantis. And you also have Lavosi, and Lavosi is an intelligent plant with vines and branches that serve as vocal cords, and they are quite strange to the other character races in terms of communication, but it's quite cool to be able to play as this amorphous being with a lot of handy appendages flowing out of it. You also have races such as the Rebornai, which is basically a giant spider, and this type of player race actually is quite sophisticated and intelligent. And you also have Shades. Shades is a very interesting race to play because you're basically an undead spirit that is reanimating and possessing different corpses. So it's going to be quite a flexible player race to use, but at the same time it's going to be quite challenging as you will have to adjust to the new body that you are using. You also have races such as the Uelok, it's basically like a humanoid torso with atrophied limbs and moves everything through levitation. And there are just so many races. I could go on and on and on. And these different races have different abilities, and well, they are more predisposed to certain character builds, to certain powers and skills, and they will be different at different tasks. Effective at different tasks. And just the character build process is quite rich. It's very deep and rich. Probably one of the richest character processes I've ever seen. The depth is just mesmerizing, dizzying. You're going to be able to choose from a number of faculties and traits, disadvantages, advantages. You're going to suffer penalties such as being imperceptive or feeble or dim-witted, but this will give you bonus points to get some other more positive things such as evasive, being effective at backstabbing, very good at combo attacks and using armor. And there are even some vocational traits. So if you have a particular character concept in mind, maybe you say, I want to play a sort of like a beast master character. You have the sort of like a template here, so you can play that character. Or maybe you want to play like someone who specializes in using poison. You have the venomist. Everything is just huge. The scope of it all is huge. You have a large list of armor, weaponry. You have rules on how to create magical items. You have magical items, example magical items. You have all sorts of gear, provisions, services, vehicles. And when it comes to the gameplay, it's, as I was telling you, it's of a very simple execution. You basically just roll a die, and you see if you roll higher than a success value. And if you did, well, you succeeded, but there are also critical successes and fumbles. You have tables for different failures and fumbles according if maybe you're launching an attack or maybe you're casting a spell. You have a table for that. There are also, you could also max your dice. It's called maxing, and it's basically exploding your dice when you roll the maximum number. If you rolled an 8-sided dice and you rolled an 8, you can roll again and keep rolling as long as you keep hitting the maximum number. And when it comes to combat, as I was telling you before, you have the Vexith initiative that helps you run combat quite smoothly, but you also have a traditional method for those purists that don't want anything electronic in their RPG sessions. And when it comes to lucky breaks and tough breaks, there is a small percentage, 5% chance that your character could end up being quite lucky during a combat round or quite unlucky during a turn. And you have a lot of options, everything when it comes to disarming, bull rushing, grappling, tripping your opponent. Everything is right here. You have the rules for anything that you can think of when it comes to attack, and all the rules are quite simple. You want to make a melee attack, you make a melee precision roll. If you want to do a ranged attack, range precision roll, magic precision roll, etc. And combat, as I was telling you, it's quite lethal. This is not a game where you, just because you leveled up a few times, you can jump in the middle of 20 orcs and come out of there on scratch. No, this is not that kind of game. You're going to suffer each wound. Each wound is an opportunity for you to get crippled or even killed. So everything is quite lethal, and there are no easy resurrections here. Magic is also quite serious. Those spells that could resurrect your character may end up suffering a mishap, and maybe your character comes back as a sort of like a half undead being, or maybe as a shade, and you will have to switch your playing style because of the new character. And I forgot to mention that if you ever get infected by lycanthropy, or you become a vampire, if the game master approves it, you will be able to keep on playing and not just lose your character. By it turning into a non-player character, you will be able to play as a werewolf character or a vampire character. It won't be easy because of the limitations, and in the case of the werewolf, you will have to try to keep control at all times, but it is possible, and it's quite fun when you manage to do it. And when it comes to magic, you have sample spells, but you have all the information and building blocks to create your own spells. Everything about Vexith is about making the characters that you create and the game itself your characters, your game, and you will be able to build any kind of spell that you can think of. You have 6 sources of magic: arcane magic, divine magic, elemental magic, mental magic, nature magic, and shadow magic. So if you want to create a necromancer, that's possible. An elementalist, of course, kind of like a psionic caster, that's possible as well. So you have just virtually an infinity of options to create anything magic related. And here's the part of bardic songs. Bardic songs is just dazzling. You basically choose melodies and codas, and you produce different effects through your songs. You can even produce songs that damage your opponent, so you don't feel like just a support character. And you can design any sort of song that could offer advantages and disadvantages. You're going to be it's just the hobby aspect of designing anything with Vexith is incredibly involved and rich and fulfilling. Now, you also have an excellent section on how to run the game. For those of you that want to participate in this game as a game master, you have all the advice needed to do so, all the information to create a campaign, to create the adventures within such a campaign, running the campaign, when how to build pretty much everything within a game setting. And well, it's just huge. I haven't really scratched the surface of what this game has to offer. This was quite a challenging review because Vexith took me completely by surprise. I didn't expect this fantasy game to be so just an amazing classic fantasy game that brings so many new stuff to the table. Overall, this is an excellent game. You really have to try this. And if you can't decide if you want the digital version or the physical book, I would recommend that you get the physical book, the premium version, because it's quite beautiful to look at. But the PDF version is also great. But I really fell in love with the physical book. But it all depends. Some players really like the digital version because some players don't have good eyesight and they like to zoom in to check everything in full detail. But really, trust me, get the physical book. Or maybe if you're on gaming on a budget, well, get the digital version, but really try to get the physical version, please. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.